is John, and you're listening to the Tech Leader Pro podcast. It is week 15 of 2024, Sunday, the 14th of April. You're very welcome, guys. Hope you had a nice week. After spending 20 plus years in the tech industry, you start to spot some patterns. Some of those are positive, but many are pointless or even harmful. For the negative ones, tech people like me like to use the term anti-pattern, which is, according to Wikipedia, defined as, quote, an anti-pattern in software engineering, project management, and business processes is a common response to a recurring problem that is usually ineffective and risks being highly counterproductive, end quote. And I will link to that page in the show notes for this episode. One such situation is when a new leader joins an organization, and I must admit to being guilty of some of these myself in the past. So let's look at these. There are a few classic moves that I see new leaders in an organization repeat over and over in their first 6 months from joining. The first one is a team reorg. This can include firing existing people, reducing overall headcount, or bringing in their own trusted people from the past. So the temptation here for a new leader is to always, bring in my guys. And I see this happening all the time. And the problem with that is, guys, of course, is that now you have a whole bunch of people getting onboarded at the same time who have no organizational knowledge, not just a new leader. Secondly, there is the UX refresh. Again, this is a classic response. Blame the product for the current problems and immediately design a new UX to address this. I'm a bit cynical about this one, and I often think this is the new leader buying time, because a UX refresh takes, it may be a year to 18 months, so they're just extending out their runway on the promise that the new UX will fix these issues and will start to turn things around. Thirdly, we have process re-engineering. Again, a classic response. Blame the current processes for the problems and then bring in new processes to address this. Those of us old enough will remember when the industry first started to switch to agile methodologies like Scrum. This was a classic thing for a new leader to do. When they would come in, they'd say, hey, let's switch to Scrum. That's going to fix everything. And of course, we all know there's no silver bullets. So after a few decades in the industry, these patterns start to become dull and predictable. I've come to the conclusion that most issues are cultural issues, and that takes time to fix. For people starting out on their leadership journey listening to this, remember that all of your problems are people problems. Sadly, however, a new leader within an organization may only have a few quarters to make an impact. And this is especially true in a public company, so they may be tempted to reach for the easier levers to pull upon. The higher up in an organization you climb, the less time you should be spending on detail, and the more time you should dedicate to cultural and strategic topics. An inexperienced leader will tend to do the opposite and get lost in the details. An experienced leader, however, entering a new organization will know it will take them 1 to 2 years to make a meaningful impact on culture and strategy, and should negotiate such a timeline during their interview process. Patience is the key, and the expectations need to be set accordingly from the very beginning. If a new leader wants to really change an organization, it's going to take time, and that expectation needs to be set clearly, and everybody needs to be aligned around those timelines. There are no quick fixes to cultural issues, and anybody who says otherwise is kidding themselves, and perhaps in the process trying to kid the new organization they just joined. So, apart from obsessing about new leader anti-patterns this week, what else did I do? Firstly, I've been doing a lot of work this week on greppo.org, which is my web search engine. I've been getting a lot, and I mean really a lot, of spam traffic on that website recently. It's just been getting absolutely pounded by spam. And the problem with that is it's impacting upon the core search engine, where the engine is spending a lot of time servicing search requests from spam bots, which is obviously completely pointless. Not only pointless for me in terms of consuming my server resources, but also pointless for the spam bots because somehow they think that they're creating content on my website and they're not. They're just running search queries. So I needed to put a stop to this, and the web framework that I built, Alpha Framework, has a number of filters built in for such occasions. It has filters built in, for example, for blocking IP addresses, for blocking certain clients, and it also has temporary filters that can block individual clients on a combination of both. Now, the problem with this particular spam traffic was it was coming from hundreds of different IP addresses, and it was also mimicking real browser strings in terms of the client. So initially it looked like real users, it was pretending to be real users, but when you looked at the content of the queries, it was clearly spam related topics. So I had to spend some time developing a new approach, and what I'm doing now is I'm generating what's called a nonce, or a number that's only used once, and I'm setting that for each visitor to the home page, that it'll be used on subsequent requests to confirm that that's the same user. So it's a way to connect together a session without identifying the user, because privacy for me is a big thing on grepper. We don't actually track users there at all, in terms of identifying individual users. So this nonce is there essentially just to almost act as a hidden captcha, to make sure that the person accessing the website is actually a person using a real browser, not just some automated traffic coming from a script somewhere, which is pretending to be a browser. So that has been highly effective. It's basically stopped the spam attack in its tracks, and I will include that code for that new filter in a future release of the alpha framework. And if you're interested in alpha, you can check it out by doing a search for alpha framework on packages.org, and you will find it there. In terms of media that I'm enjoying this week, I finally finished Diaspora by Greg Egan. I've been struggling through that book for quite some time now, to be frank, which is amazing because it's actually a very short book. It's about 270 pages, but it's very dense, and I just wasn't feeling engaged with it at all. And I was thinking to myself, it kind of reminded me a bit of when I was reading Moby Dick. The author would often go off on tangents discussing the anatomy of a whale, chapter after chapter on, the economics of whaling, and the plot line was just completely lost. And I found myself just, struggling through that book. And I felt the same way about Diaspora. It was a lot of stuff in there about astrophysics, which, I'm not a physicist, so I don't know whether that was accurate or not. I can certainly say that I didn't really find it that engaging. So a lot of kind of tangents and rabbit holes as you're going through that book. And I think my other problem with it was that the characters were just not that engaging. I didn't really care what happened to them by the end. There was one section where they were trying to evacuate some humans from a planet and trying to convince them to leave before a natural disaster occurred. And that was by far my favorite section of the book. But honestly, the rest of the book, I found the characters really just not that interesting. The author tried to introduce some drama towards the end, again via a natural disaster, this time one that was going to affect the whole galaxy, or the whole universe, I should say. But it just felt a bit rushed at the end, and I just found myself just not really caring whether or not these characters survived. So a difficult read, and a difficult recommendation as a result. I have read a lot of short stories by Greg Egan. I've enjoyed them much more. He is a very talented writer, and I would still recommend his work. But don't start with Diaspora. It's a bit of a challenging read. Okay, I will leave it there, guys. I hope you have a great week ahead, and I wish you well. Talk to you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.